Hello, my name is Hartmut Heilmann. I'm a freelance scientist working in the field of ecological agriculture. My research area is site physiology. You're probably going to ask, what does site physiology have to do with Terralyt, which we are presenting in this film? I've observed that there is a respiratory connection between plants and the soil. This determines to a large extent how well plants grow. You discover it if you investigate the quality of foodstuffs, and it has a decisive influence on how susceptible plants are to aphids, scale bugs or other sucking pests. When I heard that a soil adjuvant exists which influences the electrolytes balance in the soil, I said to myself, you've got to find out about that. For respiratory processes are controlled by electrolytes. That is where Terralyt gets its name. Terra stands for earth and light stands for electrolyte. I invite you to join me in getting to know Terralyt and find out how it works. To do so, we will visit the Jepsen & Jessen company in Hamburg, the exclusive distributor of Terralyt for Germany, most of the European countries and many markets overseas. I visited the managing director, Mr. Wolfhard Putzier, and talked with him. Hello, Mr. Putzier. Hello, Mr. Hermann. You're managing director of Jepsen & Jessen. When did you decide to get involved with Terralyt? Mr. Hermann, one thing my company does is to sell raw chemical materials. And in this branch, we're in essence always in search of new innovative products which we want to market in order to offer solutions for our customers' problems. And for this reason, we're very happy to have come across Terralyt in the spring of 2001. So you're a business with a long tradition. That's right, Mr. Hermann. We are a business of very long standing, and I suggest that we go to our conference room for our discussion. The Jepsen & Jessen company was founded in 1895 in Hong Kong. From the very beginning, we were involved in the sale of chemical products. Our first supply was BASF, whose products we sold in Hong Kong and China. In 1909, the company in Hamburg was founded. In the course of the years, it developed very well, and new areas of business were added to the line of products we sold. Among other things, we now sell textiles, which we sell to large retail concerns in Europe. In addition, we market mineral sands, which is used as protection against corrosion, for example in the shipbuilding industry and for other applications. The company now has 140 employees in Hamburg, and we have business contacts and branches in over 80 countries all over the world. The chemical business has remained one of our core areas of business. Thus, Terralyt fits very well into our line of products. I'm very pleased that we succeeded in taking over the distribution of this product. Terralyt is manufactured according to a patented process in Germany and is a soil adjuvant. You will ask, what is a soil adjuvant? According to fertilizer laws, soil adjuvants are characterized by a low mineral content as opposed to fertilizers. Terralyt supplies approximately 84 grams of organically fixed sodium per hectare, i.e. a negligible amount, but one which nevertheless works as a catalyst. We've only gathered experience with Terralyt for half a year. Before we talk about our experience, we'd like to show what exemplary success other countries have had with the product. First of all, the Netherlands. Not far from the German border, we're visiting the De Kemp Market Garden near the small town of Venlo. Hello, Mr. de Klein. You're the manager of this seedling raising business. That's right. How long have you been using Terralyt? Last year for the first time. Ah, yes. That means you've used it repeatedly. Yes. And has your experience been positive? Oh, yes. And which plants do you actually raise? Strawberry plants, asparagus and rootstocks. Could we have a look at that, perhaps? Yes, we can drive over to the greenhouse and have a look. As opposed to the mature strawberry plants whose fruit one can eat, the seedlings remain in the soil and develop there. Mr. de Klein, we're here in your greenhouse. How large is it? About 1.5 hectares. All strawberry seedlings? Yes. And you use Terralyt on them? Yes. What was the observed effect which Terralyt had? I observed that the plants had 30% more hair roots. The hair roots are important for the blossoms and later for the taste, the aroma and the yield of the plants. And you found out what effect Terralyt had the following year? Yes, and the following year the plants had more blossoms and there was a higher yield. The better development of the roots is of great significance for the development of the plants in the following year? Oh, yes. The root development is just as important for the growth and colours of ornamental plants as it is for strawberry plants. Cor Engelen from the experimental enterprise Fleuren convinced the experienced floriculturist Jacques Willems to use Terralyt. At first he claimed his substrates couldn't be improved and was very sceptical for that reason. When I read about the miracle substance in the paper, I got curious. At the time we were planning to organize a flower exhibition. I said to myself, it might just be a sales pitch. The best thing is to try it out and see for myself, and I did. The difference you see is in the flowering and the development of the plants.
Dan krijg je ook het verschil in bloei en ontwikkeling van de plant.
At first you were very critical, but why did you end up ordering 8 bottles within the course of a few days?
Binnen een paar dagen 8 flessen.
Ja, collega's, die wilden dat ook uitproberen. Dat is hobbymensen onder elkaar. En wat een mens ziet, en dan wil je het ook proberen.
Well, the other floriculturists wanted to try it too. You believe what you see, and such results show what Terralyt can do.
En dat doet ook meerdere volgen voor dat Terralyt ook te gebruiken.
Now, if you take a closer look, you see that there is a considerable improvement in the roots and the shoots. In the summer you told me that you didn't have to use insecticide for aphids.
Dat je bijna niet hoeft te spuiten voor luizen, etc.
Well, healthy plants have fewer problems with vermin. Does that mean that Terralyt helps keep the plants healthy?
In ieder geval in de grond, je zorgt dat de grond optimaal.
Yes, the soil is optimal. The other floriculturists agree that the garden mold is much more porous and has more air in it and makes for better root development. I would say the same.
En doet hij veel beter wortelontwikkeling. Ja, dat zie je ook zo.
Ja, je ziet het heel duidelijk.
Well, that's obvious. One can clearly see that there are a lot more blossoms on the plants. But the most you have to tell is about plants which otherwise hadn't blossomed before and then blossomed twice.
Dan kun jij misschien het meeste over vertellen.
Ja, de koningin van de nacht. Tenminste, dat is de Nederlandse
the
naam.
Queen of the Night. That's the Dutch name in any case. Usually you can't get them to bloom. The year before last it blossomed twice, and this year even 3 times. Everyone was amazed that there were so many blossoms. A total of 141 on one plant. A plant which was 2.5 meters long.
Staan ze allemaal van te kijken hoe het mogelijk is dat er zoveel bloemen in komen.
That's incredible. Yes, at 11 in the evening they were open.
Ik moet zeggen dat wij toch een zeer goede samenwerking hebben gekregen sinds die tijd.
Jacques, I'd like to thank you for your helpful collaboration and for helping me now and then when we have to give a talk. Do you do it because you are so satisfied with the product?
Dat je zo tevreden bent?
Ik ben een keertje meegegaan, maar het valt op. Ze willen weten wat het is.
Well, the people want to know what Terralyt Plus is. If you've used it and talk about your success, they believe it. The best is if you can show the good results, then everyone starts using it. Aren't these colors beautiful? Here we've seen how Terralyt works, and the order in which you do things is interesting. First you treat the soil, then the roots grow better, and then the plants flourish. That makes it clear why you couldn't see any difference in Martin de Klein's strawberry plants above the ground at first. First, something has to happen to the soil. It's like a pendulum with one pole concealed. The movement in the direction of the visible pole is only understandable if you take the impulse of the concealed pole into consideration. Plants are, so to speak, the result of processes which take place in the soil, and these processes usually go unobserved. That is why it was so important for us to see how Terralyt improved the growth of Jacques Willem's seedlings. Extensive effects on the yield were ascertained in Denmark. Let's go and visit Mr. Erwin Jensen in Tinglev, who markets Terralyt in Scandinavia. Mr. Jensen, you just had another yield report for Terralyt in your hand. Was that another Terralyt customer? Yes, that was practically our first customer here in Denmark who used it on potatoes. We didn't get the product until June of 1999, and we gave a litre of it to the farmer. He was supposed to try it out in practice here in Denmark. The result was very good, even though it was sprayed late in the season. And he bought more last year, and he used it on 75% of his acreage. We dug up the potatoes again this year, and the result was the same as for the previous delivery for the starch factory. He thanked us for having helped him hoe the potatoes and faxing the results. He ordered more for next year, for all his potato fields, that is 10 hectares. It's a good situation with satisfied customers. You can see by looking at the yield report. Here you can see 520 hectokilograms as opposed to 479. He has a netto yield of 1,846 Danish crowns per hectare. And if you multiply that by 10 hectares, then that is more than 18,000 crowns earned just by using Terralyt. And is it easy for him to meet his quota for the starch factory? Do you sell a lot in summer? No. Usually you don't start selling until January. And that goes on for January, February, March and April. You don't really stop selling until May. But then all the farmers have sown, and the agent should be sprayed before the plants start to mature, so it can start taking effect. I can show you how we do that using the year 2000 as an example. On the sheet you can see that we carried out 15 experiments on potatoes last year. We listed them. Treated potatoes versus untreated potatoes. And then we added up the columns. The results are an increase in yield amounting to 3,500 Danish crowns per hectare. In terms of percentages, that's an average of 13 to 14% more. For many farmers, it's interesting to see how it works. But the ideas behind it are often hard to follow, aren't they? Yes, it is of course interesting to know how something works. We can say Terralyt is patented, and it is also a secret. We don't know the exact composition of the substance, how it is produced, etc. It's a complicated procedure. The farmers are most interested in the fact that it does work, and they're very interested in what yield they can get with it. If they use it and get a higher yield, which amounts to 3,500 crowns per hectare, that's probably what matters most to the farmers. The times have not always been so good for agriculture. Sometimes it is of existential importance that one gets a good yield, and that is true for the future too, if you want to survive as a farmer. Erwin Jensen's business markets Terralyt all over Scandinavia. In Denmark, those who cultivate starch potatoes are particularly interested in the soil adjuvement. We visited one of these agricultural businesses. We're here at Jürgen Hansen's business near Bredebro in Denmark. Approximately 1/4 of his 154 hectares are used to grow potatoes. He's used Terralyt for the second year now. In this field, we were able to document a large difference between plants treated with Terralyt and those who weren't, because he set up a so-called treatment window. In order to ascertain for himself what the effect is, he leaves one row untreated so as to be able to make a better comparison. Setting up a treatment window for the same sort of plant using the same fertilizer is a good means for determining the effect of any kind of fertilizer. A plot harvest makes it possible to estimate the per hectare yield relatively easily and quickly without having to measure out, harvest and weigh the crops from large areas. For Jürgen Hansen, there was an increase of yield due to Terralyt of approximately 40%. We'll take a look at this difference in a moment. So here we're in a so-called treatment window. This soil was not treated with Terralyt, and now we want to see how the potato plants are doing. No potatoes are left on the plants. That tells us something about the maturity of this stand. To compare, we will now look at the plants treated with Terralyt. Okay, now we're on the plot which was treated with Terralyt, and we want to see how these plants are doing here. Here you can see how the potatoes are hanging down. That means that the plant has not died yet and will continue to grow until harvest time. In those places where no Terralyt was used, the plants have stopped growing. The tubers stay in the soil, but the conjunctive organs are already in the process of dying. You can be sure of that. On the plot treated with Terralyt, there will still be considerable growth before harvest time, and the difference which we documented the day before yesterday, i.e. 40% more yield for plants treated with Terralyt, will increase even more. Harvest time will be in about 3 weeks. It'll be interesting to see just how big the difference will be. During a visit to his field, which measures 6.7 hectares, the farmer Jürgen Hansen told us about his experience with Terralyt. The use of Terralyt was a great success for him. The result, an increase in yield of 16.7 tons of potatoes per hectare. In other words, 9,000 crowns more per hectare. For the harvest which is yet to come, the plants haven't even stopped growing. In any case, Jürgen Hansen is counting on at least a 10 to 20% higher yield.
Vielleicht sollte man dann noch einmal eine Probe machen.
Ja,
Und wie groß ist dieses Feld insgesamt?
det 6,7 hektar.
Ja, dann wird man schon einen großen Unterschied feststellen.
Ja, det kan man.
The AKS Toftland potato starch factory is a central destination for a lot of the crops. From early autumn into the winter, the farmers from southern Jutland bring their potatoes here. Upon delivery, a sample is taken to ascertain the starch content and the percentage of dirt. To do this, the potatoes are washed and weighed. They are weighed in a water bath to ascertain the specific weight, which is used to calculate the starch content. This serves as the basis for payment. Thus, a higher starch content means a financial plus for the farmer. Adolf Moos, managing clerk of the Irvin Jensen Company, explains the evaluation to us. At present, we have 2 trucks in the factory, and here we have the truck weighing number. And the farmer has a number too. Then you can see whose delivery it was. And here you see the time of delivery. Here we already have the first evaluation. 4% dirt and 21.7% starch. On the whole, the potato starch is delivered to the foodstuffs industry. Contract growing is an important source of income for the farmers. Actually, it was only a coincidence that Terralyt got used for growing carrots. It happened that Jürgen Hansen's father sprayed his potatoes and still had some Terralyt solution left in his spraying machine. He used it on his carrots and had the impression that they grew somewhat better. For this reason, he has initiated a practical experiment and has treated part of his carrots with Terralyt, part without it. Together with Mr. Adolf Moos, the one who assisted us at the potato starch factory, we've carried out a plot eradication. For our test lifting, we measured out a 2-meter-long strip of field which had been treated with Terralyt, and a strip the same length which had been left untreated, and then lifted the carrots. It's basically quite easy to carry out cultivation tests of your own. All you need is a uniform field with the same preceding crop and the same fertilizer. You learn a lot in the process. By the way, these carrots are being grown to produce carrot juice.
Hier ist der Gabel. Danke. Da bin ich ja gespannt, was wir hier auf dem Unterhandelten finden. Wollen wir mal sehen. So, meine Probe kommt da rein. Ja.
To avoid distorting the results, we made sure to keep the untreated and treated carrots completely separate. The results speak for themselves. 4.5 kilos of untreated carrots as opposed to 6 kilos of treated ones.
Das macht ungefähr 6 Kilo.
This impressive first experiment with carrots suggests that in the future Terralyt should also be used for other kinds of vegetables grown for processing. Since there is a large market for this, it will be of great interest to see what happens. But now let's talk about corn, an area of application which is particularly relevant for the Jensen company. Mr. Jensen, why are we visiting this part of the cornfield? Mr. Heimann, the story is that there are 3 state-run experimental fields for corn in Denmark where we're trying out Terralyt. This one is called Hellevej. It is the southernmost site. Then we have one up near the Esbjerg-Varde region and another one up near Aarhus at the State Experimental Station. The 3 fields are evaluated together after the harvest, and the results are incorporated into the state-run experiments, which form the basis for the Green Book, which is published every year, showing which substances have got good results and what the farmers should do the following year, what they should plant, etc.
Tun sollte, was man anpflanzen sollte, ob man dies oder das anders machen sollte.
Over there we didn't use Terralyt. This has been treated with Terralyt. You can see it right after sowing. The purpose is to prove that Terralyt makes for a higher yield in terms of mass and quality. Afterwards, what counts is that the final silage is high quality, so that the cows need less feed concentrate, which is cheaper for the farmers. And it is also important to obtain a higher dairy performance. Why is it so important that the results appear in the Green Book later on? Well, all the experiments which are carried out in Denmark every year, whether it is experiments like this, or with fertilizer or insecticides or the like, are published in it. And the Green Book is really the Bible of agriculture and a reference book for farmers. And whatever it says has been tested by the government, and the experiments and their results are not only taken seriously in Denmark, but all over the world. Now we see the field which is treated with Terralyt. You can see the ears have already developed much better, 8 weeks before the harvest. We can go over to the untreated plot in a moment. And there you'll see that the ears haven't developed as well yet. For this reason, we're confident that the results which the farmers have obtained during the past 2 years in practice, during which time it was possible to increase the yield considerably, will be confirmed by this experiment as well. We've seen what Terralyt can do for potatoes and carrots. The results of the state-run corn experiments in Denmark have now been publicized. In this Green Book, there's a report on what agents and procedures are advantageous for Danish farmers. The State Office for Plant Cultivation has reported what results were obtained with Terralyt. On the whole, the yields are higher, but what is more essential is that the energy content is considerably higher. In May of 2001, it was too late for us to get involved in any state-run experiments. For this reason, we conducted numerous practical experiments. 6 of them were carried out by candidates for the Master's Diploma in collaboration with the State Academy for Agriculture in Kupferzell in northern Baden-Württemberg. The 2 grain experiments didn't achieve very much because Terralyt was used late in the season and there was an arid period in the early summer. In the 4 experiments with corn, Terralyt affected an overall increase in yield of approximately 10%. We visited 2 farmers and asked them about their experiences. The first one was Markus Strobel from Schönbrunn. Schönbrunn belongs to the municipality of Wallhausen in the district of Schwäbisch Hall. Mr. Strobel, you tried out Terralyt this year. How did you use it? In the course of my training, I conducted an experiment on corn. In doing so, I cultivated 3 different kinds. And for each kind, I cultivated some using Terralyt, some without Terralyt. And during the growth period, we really didn't ascertain much of a difference. But when we harvested the corn, we did some evaluations, and the results suggested that the corn treated with Terralyt was better. In the case of one kind, we were not able to make an exact evaluation because the crop wasn't uniform. I made a nice diagram. Here, you can see, the blue stands for the corn treated with Terralyt and the red is for the corn not treated with it. You get a general idea of which is better. Diplomat was the kind where the crop wasn't uniform. In the case of Symphony, there was a difference of approximately 10%, and in the case of Kerkenna, the difference was 5%. Diplomat only manifested a difference of 1%. We sprayed with Terralyt on May 31st, at which time the corn was in the 4-leaf stage. Markus Strobel's results are very interesting. And the results obtained by Manfred Hofmann in Wolmershausen near Kreilsheim are at least as interesting. On his approximately 30-hectare large crop area, he ascertained a 12% increase in yield. What was most significant from our point of view was the feed evaluation. It documented a much higher energy content for the silo corn. Mr. Hofmann, this year you tried out Terralyt for the first time. How did that come to pass? Well, I tried out the Terralyt in my business. I tried it out on the silo corn. It was very late by the time we did the spraying, not until June, because the weather didn't allow it until then. But after only 8 weeks, it was already clear that the corn treated with Terralyt was more uniform in quality. During controls made later, it was clearly evident that this remained the case. And how did you assess the yield after that? Well, we harvested 10 square meters of corn treated with Terralyt and 10 square meters not treated with it. But even the samples we took showed a difference of 2 kilograms per square meter, which is to say 2,000 kilograms per hectare. What does it mean when you say that the energy content is 30% higher? If you breed dairy cows, it means that the cows give milk more easily and perhaps also a bit more. And you can save on feed concentrate this way. For fattening pigs, it's also well suited for use as grain corn because the energy content is very high. We conducted a whole series of experiments with corn in areas extending from Frankfurt-Oder to northern Baden-Württemberg. You see that the corn treated with Terralyt always turned out better. There was regional aridity between May and the end of July. There were also 2 cases in which Terralyt was sprayed late in the season and the results were not so good, but in each case the corn treated with Terralyt never turned out worse than the control lot. Now let's talk about another area of application. What we want to know is, how does Terralyt work on special cultures such as vine grapes, fruit, sage, coffee, cocoa, asparagus or other cultures which sell for a high price per hectare? We carried out some experiments with wine grapes. Let's visit the vineyards of Thomas Schaffner in Bötzingen near the Kaiserstuhl. The Kaiserstuhl is located to the south of the Upper Rhine Fault, so to speak, on the sunny side of southern Germany. The Black Forest and Vosges Mountains look down upon this attractive landscape, which is very popular among tourists, from which the Kaiserstuhl emerges as a kind of landmark. Underneath its loess, you find very fertile volcanic stone. For good reason, wines from the Kaiserstuhl are considered to have vintage quality. Bötzingen is a well-known wine-growing town with about 5,000 inhabitants. The wine grower Thomas Schaffner is one of them. He tried out Terralyt on his wine. On his 4.5 hectare large wine estate, he cultivates, ages and sells his own wines. Mr. Schaffner, you practice ecological viticulture. What brought you to do that? Makes more work, doesn't it? Yes. My wife and I diagnosed wood preservative contamination about 10 years ago. The result was that we had an allergic reaction to insecticides. And then our physician recommended that we either start cultivating wine on an ecological basis or stop altogether.
Den ökologischen Weinbau anzustreben oder vom Weinbau sich ganz zu trennen.
Well, it looks like you prefer to remain a wine grower. Yes, my whole heart's in it. And then I said it's certainly worth to try cultivating wine ecologically. And what's the special thing about cultivating wine ecologically? Well, originally all we wanted to do was to change from chemical insecticides to ecological ones, but that doesn't work. You have to begin with the soil. I asked the advice of people who had been growing wine ecologically for a long time, and they all said that we have to start with the soil. And that means the transformation begins with the soil and then goes on with the plants. Oh, those are very general observations. What does that mean in practice? Well, in practice that means starting with the soil. The soil is the basis for the cultivation of wine, and therefore we have to create healthy soil structures in order to prepare the plants for the transformation.
beschaffen, die Pflanzen dann auf die Umstellung vorzubereiten.
Okay, so that means it's a matter of preparing the soil. Do you also use a basic fertilizer? Well, basic fertilizer is a foundation. We need soil which is porous and has good soil structure so that water is absorbed and there is good soil life. And that only happens in good soil which also has a good structure. Do you also have a lot of earthworms and so? Yes. Well, that's very good. And this year you used Terralyt for the first time. What were the results of that? We sprayed with Terralyt this year in July. When we picked the grapes, i.e. at the time of the vintage, we ascertained a higher yield with the same quality. Due to the weather, we were forced to do 2 pickings, and the first time around the result was that it was possible to pick more grapes. That is, the grapes treated with Terralyt were riper sooner than the others. Furthermore, there was almost a 6% increase in yield. That doesn't sound like a lot, does it? 6% is 6%. When you're talking about profitability in the business, then you can say that 6% is a factor which makes a real difference for us. But what's also essential is that we had ripe grapes earlier on. That means that in years where the weather isn't so good, we can also have the guarantee that the grapes will ripen.
Nicht so günstig ist, dass wir auch eine garantierte Ausreifung der Trauben haben. Wir können früher
We can pick our grapes earlier and also obtain a higher quality. But that's dependent on the year. Every year is different. Yes. And you also use Terralyt very late in the season? Yes. Personally, I was of the opinion that we wouldn't obtain any results by using Terralyt so late in the season because grapevines are perennial plants with a root penetration of up to 2 to 3 meters. And my personal assumption was that we wouldn't see any results at all. I was surprised at what we ultimately saw.
Ich war überrascht über das, was wir gesehen haben.
Let's leave southern Germany and hop up to the rolling hills between Taunus and Westerwald, where in the vicinity of Limburg on the Lahn the Bombastus farm is located. It got its name from the physician Theophrastus Bombastus of Hohenheim, who called himself Paracelsus. We're here on a relatively old sage stand of the Bombastus farm, where we have set up our Terralyt experiment. To carry it out, we treated a strip on the edge measuring 10 meters, left a 10-meter control zone, treated the next 10 meters, left the next untreated, and then harvested the crop very carefully. To do so, the shoot tips are cut off and collected by a special apparatus, weighed and dried on the Bombastus farm. In our plot experiment with 16 square meters per plot, the plants treated with Terralyt yielded 800 grams more all 6 times we counted. That is approximately 20%. That was amazing for us, because we'd only started to use Terralyt 4 months previously. The sage comes straight from the field into a solar drying system in which it's dried slowly at low temperatures. When the fresh green leaves are dry, they're raked together and piled up higher. We were able to dry the harvest from the plots used for our experiment separately. I took another look at that. We harvested the sage exactly 3 weeks ago, and now it's dried. We wanted to know what the results would be after drying, and whether one would still ascertain a large difference in favor of the crop treated with Terralyt. To do this, we put the treated and untreated samples into 6 paper sacks and weighed them. Proportionately speaking, the results corresponded to those obtained when measuring the fresh sage crop. It's the same as the last time with the fresh crop. The Terralyt treated sage always weighs more than the control group. And now we have to calculate what that means in terms of percentages. Yes, well, we must consider that the percentages might fluctuate due to the dry weight, which stands in relation to 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. Yes, we'll see whether that's the case. By the way, what brought you to cultivate sage? It isn't a common culture after all. Well, I'm the agricultural administrator on this farm, and when I came here they were already growing a lot of sage as well as other medicinal and herbal plants. And it became clear to us that sage is the plant which we can cultivate and get positive results with. For that reason we extended our acreage, and we now supply the pharmaceutical and cosmetic industry, which makes its preparations from it. And that would seem to be quite a good market if you can have such success on it. We've established ourselves on the market. It's like any other market. You have to get a good foothold on it, and then you have a chance to survive. It's very interesting for me to see that in the case of all the combinations there was always a considerably higher yield with Terralyt. In other words, if I count up all 3 combinations, those with Terralyt and the control lots, that means that the Terralyt yield is 9.47 kilogram, and the yield of the control lot is 7.97 kilogram.
Und die Kontrolle hat 7,97 Kilogramm. Und wenn man das nachprüft,
Now if you calculate the difference, you see that it's 18.82% more. That means an increase in yield of practically 19%. That's right, just like for the fresh crop. Yes, that's a factor of about 20%. That means that we also find significantly higher yields in the case of special cultures, and the plants also ripen more quickly, making it possible to harvest them sooner. In cases where Terralyt was applied too late in the season, we didn't see any difference in the yield for grapes. In one case, we had too high a yield. The wine grower had not reckoned with a 20% increase in yield. This resulted in a decrease in the quality of the wine density. If he had thinned the grapes properly, he wouldn't have had any problems. Thus, higher yields do not always lead to better results.
Nicht immer also führen höhere Erträge auch zu besseren Ergebnissen.
But let's talk about the potatoes again. The success in Denmark has encouraged us to pursue the effects of Terralyt on this culture in Germany as well. We had 3 areas of experimentation. First of all, table potatoes in the Lüneburg heath. Second, table potatoes in southern Germany. Third, starch potatoes in Emsland. The experiments with table potatoes in southern Germany were on the whole very positive. We had an overall increase in yield of over 10%. Only in one area, where it didn't rain enough in June and July, we got more tubers using Terralyt but didn't obtain a higher yield. The moisture needed for the tubers to develop was missing. This can happen if your workshop is under the open sky. In our documentary film, we still have 2 places to go to show our experiments. First, let's take a look at the Lüneburg heath. Finnstedt has about 100 inhabitants and is located in the district of Uelzen. It's a well-known fact that the sandy soil of the heath is a suitable location for growing potatoes. Wolf-Dieter Haberland planted table potatoes on 53 of the 208 hectares which his farm encompasses. Over or undersized potatoes can't be sold. For this reason, it's important, as opposed to starch potatoes, that the potatoes be relatively uniform in size. They are also carefully stored, because potatoes should be put on the market at regular intervals the whole year round. Mr. Haberland, we experimented with Terralyt on your farm as well. Well, how's the evaluation done? Yes, well, we try to take a practice-oriented approach as far as possible. We harvested the whole crop from one plot all at once, grubbed out and stored the potatoes in crates. We did that with the potatoes treated with Terralyt, as well as with the untreated ones. We did that so as to be able to make an accurate comparison, not only taking 2.5 or 6 meters from the middle of the field, but the whole plot. And then we measured the exact acreage. And the yield per hectare was calculated accordingly. You couldn't make a better comparison. In the case of such a high yield, over 50 tons of table potatoes, one wouldn't normally expect it to be higher than the control lot. Thus, it's particularly significant from Wolf-Dieter Haberland's perspective that in accordance with the experiment conducted by the Agricultural Association of Ebstorf, there was an improvement in the grade of the potatoes. Now let's leave the Lunenburg Heath and go to Emsland, a sandy and moory area on the border to the Netherlands. In a district of the city of Meppen, Laurens Schepergerdes runs a relatively large farm with approximately 150 hectares of starch potatoes. As we did in Denmark, we carried out a trial lifting on Mr. Schepergerdes' farm. This time we measured out plots of treated and untreated crops measuring 5 meters each.
Okay, gut. 14 Pflanzen?
In both cases, the result was 14 plants.
Herr Schepergerdes?
Ja, das ist behandelte Fläche.
In order to obtain exact weights, the potato tubers were stored in baskets after being lifted and were separated and designated with slips of paper according to whether they'd been treated or not.
Dass man das nur nicht verwechselt nachher. Das gut kennzeichnen. Jetzt wollen wir erstmal das Para von den Körben bestimmen.
So.
Sie sind der Chef an der Bahn.
Gut.
After subtracting the weight of the basket, the Terralyt lot weighed 4.5 kilos more than the untreated lot did.
So.
For Mr. Schepergerdes, the weight of the crop is not the only significant factor, however. What matters most is the starch content.
26,1.
26,1. Das sind also 4,5 Kilo mehr.
Ja.
German and Dutch farmers deliver potatoes to the starch factory in Emlichheim in autumn and winter. As in Denmark, the starch content is determined with the help of a specific weight. We had our potatoes examined here as well. The results of the plot harvest also take the starch content into account, for Terralyt usually doesn't change it. The improvement in yield generally derives from better growth and a prolonged tuberization phase. It's good that it was possible to harvest something for your experiment, and quite a few of the other potatoes rotted in the course of the year, didn't they? We have a pretty sandy soil here. The sand content measures something like 27 to 28 points. Ploughing is never really a problem here. Yes, and this morning we made a trial run and dug up 5 meters of crops. In the background we can see the machine which will be used for the large-scale experiment. We'll weigh the crops and then we can see what the difference is between the potatoes treated and those which weren't. When did you spray Terralyt? Well, end of May. Actually, it was too late, but in terms of the weather it turned out to be okay. Well, let's see what happens. We can tell by the results of the evaluation. With great regularity, we've ascertained that Terralyt increases the pH value. There are simple and economic methods for determining this. To do so, you take a mixed sample from about 15 places in each of the plots which you want to compare. Okay, now make the samples homogeneous so that they are nice and evenly mixed up. The reagent pill is added to the test tube. After that, everything is filled up with distilled water. I always take 2 samples because you never know. You can see this is a good example. You always get certain fluctuations. Maybe it would even be better to take more samples, but the result is very clear. For the control lot, the color is light blue or green, and for the Terralyt lot, it's darker blue. And that means that the pH value is higher, and that means also better. With a large-scale experiment, one always obtains more significant results than one can from a plot experiment. Here there was a yield increase of about 4 tons, or 8%, as a result of the Terralyt treatment. One can easily imagine what that means for some 50 hectares of potatoes. Well, that clearly shows the effect of Terralyt. It normalizes the pH levels of the soil. We've ascertained this time and again with our colour tests, soil always has a tendency to acidify, and for this reason farmers and gardeners lime it. Plants don't grow well if the pH levels are too low. This makes clear why Terralyt was developed for use in combating the death of the forest. It normalizes the pH levels, and forests in particular suffer from acidic soil. During the period of time which we had at our disposal, we couldn't conduct very much research on this aspect. What we also want to investigate are the effects on sucking vermin. I personally was really fascinated by the fact that a peach tree which grows in my yard, which got leaf lice every year and was then treated with Terralyt, stopped getting them for quite a while. And when it finally did get them again, they hardly did any damage at all. Now, we don't have enough time to document what effects Terralyt has on the yield of vegetables and field peas either. The increase in yield amounted to between 10 and 14%. In summarizing, one can say 2 things about what we showed in this film. First of all, because of its advantages, there is a market for Terralyt. Secondly, due to its positive effect on the auto-regulation of the soil, Terralyt is in keeping with ecological policy making and is thus in tune with the spirit of the times. For this reason, Jepsen & Jessen has added this product to their line. We're very interested to see what developments we've set in motion by introducing Terralyt to the market.